You'll handle the monthly payments, okay? You make a high income, so it's only natural, right? My mother casually tossed a bomb that would destroy my life, as if she were making small talk. What? I set down the fork I was holding and stared at my mother, frozen in place. What did she just say? I desperately tried to process the situation, forcing my brain to spin, but the scene in front of me was so unreal that my thoughts simply could not keep up. At the center of the dining table sat a whole chicken, still steaming. Surrounding it were my father, Daniel Parker, cheerfully sipping red wine, my sister, Melissa Parker, gazing smugly at her brand new nails with a self satisfied smile, and my mother, Rebecca Parker, wearing a perfectly matter of fact expression as she delivered her devilish proposal. I work as a senior architect at a major architectural firm, and I had just returned to my parents' home tonight after being summoned with the words, "There's something important we need to tell you." What they presented was a lavish brochure spread out on the table, along with a thick stack of contract documents. Lakeside Manor, an exclusive retreat for the chosen on the shores of Lake Michigan. The cover of the brochure showed a lake glowing in the sunset, with a modern luxury mansion standing proudly along its shore. A glass-walled living room, a vast wooden deck, and even a private boat dock. It was truly a dream vacation home. Because of my profession, I can instantly assess real estate value. This location, this level of quality, no matter how you calculate it, this property would easily cost no less than $800,000. Mom, wait a second. I don't understand what you're saying, I asked, my voice trembling. Did you buy this vacation home? Yes, we signed the contract. My mother's voice bounced with excitement. It's for Melissa. You know how she doesn't fit in with city life and keeps getting stressed, right? So I thought she needed a place where she could relax and focus on her creative work by a quiet lakeside. I looked at my 28-year-old sister sitting next to me, Melissa. She has no steady job and calls it finding herself. While using our parents' money to travel abroad or jump into hobbies she quickly gets bored of. A textbook parasite. And by creative work, she probably meant nothing more than taking selfies to post on Instagram. Creative work. Melissa, what about your job? What happened to the boutique clerk position you just started last month? I quit, Melissa answered without a hint of guilt. The manager was annoying, and standing all day makes my legs swell. Besides, I need a more creative environment. I feel like my talent will finally blossom at this vacation home. So you bought this, Dad, Mom? What about the down payment? Did the loan even get approved? My father slowly set down his wine glass and began to speak in a heavy voice. That's where you come in, Sophie. Your mother and I will be retiring from work before long, and passing the screening for a loan this large would be difficult for us. But the banker gave us a wonderful proposal. My father slid the documents that had been tucked beneath the brochure across the table toward me. They were a joint guarantor consent form for a home mortgage and an authorization for automatic monthly withdrawals. The names on the property will be mine, your mother's, and Melissa's, but the proof of actual repayment ability and the monthly payments themselves will be your responsibility. What? I shot to my feet without thinking. Don't be ridiculous. Why do I have to pay for Melissa's vacation home? I'm not even going to live there. That was when my mother said it, just like that. You earn a good living, don't you? We're family, so of course it's natural. The anger went beyond rage, and I felt dizzy. How much studying do you think I did to become an architect, and how much overtime I worked to build my career? That salary is compensation for my labor. It's not there to fund Melissa's playground. Sophie, how dare you talk like that? My father slammed his hand on the table and shouted, What do you mean, a playground? This is an investment in your sister's future. You're the older sister, aren't you? Your sister is struggling, and yet you live elegantly in a city apartment, sitting on money, and you won't even help her. Struggling? Melissa isn't struggling at all. She just wants a more luxurious life. That's awful. Melissa let out a fake sobbing sound and covered her face. You've always been like this. Whenever I try to be happy, you immediately get in the way. You look down on me just because I'm sensitive, don't you? That's right, Sophie. You're the older sister, so you have a duty to protect your younger sister. My mother pressed on relentlessly. And besides, you have plenty of savings, don't you? I heard you were promoted recently. It's only $2,500 a month. That's nothing for you, is it? $2,500 a month? For 30 years? Do they have any idea how much that adds up to in total? And they expect me to gift that to them? I refuse. I said it coldly. I will never pay, not a single cent. I won't sign that contract, and I'm not giving you my bank account number. Sophie, that's enough. When I went to college, you said you didn't have the money and refused to pay a single cent of my tuition. I graduated by nearly killing myself with scholarships and part-time jobs. And during that same time, you bought Melissa a brand new car. Years of resentment came pouring out. I am not your ATM. Melissa, if you want a vacation home that badly, then get a job and pay for it yourself. I grabbed my bag and started walking toward the front door. Wait, we're not finished talking yet. My mother chased after me, screaming shrilly. You ungrateful child. You can't even listen to your parents' request. Of course I can't listen to something this unreasonable. I shouted back while slipping on my shoes. If you use my name without permission, I won't let it slide. Don't ever call me over for something like this again. If you walk out that door, don't think of us as your family anymore. With my father's curses ringing in my ears, I slammed the door of my parents' house shut. The moment I got into my car and stepped on the accelerator, tears spilled over. Tears of frustration and of humiliation. Had my family really rotted this far? As I drove down the highway at night, I made a vow to myself. I will never return to that house again. I will protect my own life. This is the end. I will cut ties completely, once and for all. But at that time, I was still naive. I underestimated their twisted obsession with so-called family bonds and their greed for money. They were not the kind of people who would give up just because I said no. 3 weeks later, when I returned home from work, a thick envelope was sitting in the mailbox of my apartment. The sender was the local district court. The moment I held the envelope marked certified mail and special delivery, a bad feeling made my fingertips tremble. When I opened it, what came out was a lawsuit. Plaintiff, Daniel Parker, Rebecca Parker. Defendant, Sophie Parker. Claim, the defendant shall pay the plaintiffs the sum of $500,000 as compensation for emotional distress and damages resulting from breach of contract. As I continued reading the complaint, it was filled with an array of unbelievable lies. The defendant had verbally agreed to financially support her parents and sister for the foreseeable future, in exchange for allowing her parents to use their retirement funds to purchase a home for the sister. However, the defendant unilaterally broke this agreement, causing the plaintiff severe emotional distress and significant financial losses. Therefore, as compensation, the plaintiffs demand the sum of $500,000. I have never once made any such verbal agreement. Out of spite for my refusal to pay, they were trying to squeeze money out of me through a legal battle. Are they out of their minds? I muttered to myself in the empty room. Before anger could take hold, a bottomless fear surged up inside me. My own parents had sued me, their daughter, and only for the sake of forcing me to pay for my sister's vacation home. Bracing my knees that felt like they might give out at any moment, I grabbed the smartphone resting on the kitchen counter. I had no choice but to fight. Against a monster called family, I was about to enter a lawsuit that would put my very life on the line. The complaint in my hands felt as heavy as lead. My annual income as an architect is not bad, but there is no way I could casually come up with a sum like $500,000. And to think it was being demanded based on a completely fabricated, verbal agreement. With trembling fingers, I tapped my smartphone screen and first sent a message to my boss requesting time off for the next day. I had to find a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a highly capable one who was strong in ugly family disputes and who could prove my innocence. I did not sleep a single minute that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my parents' twisted smiles at the dinner table and my mother's words, "You make a high income, so of course it's natural," replayed over and over, making nausea rise up inside me. The next morning, I visited a law firm. It had a strong reputation online and advertised itself as being experienced in family disputes. Nice to meet you, Sophie. I'm Andrew Collins. I've already heard the outline of your situation. I told Attorney Collins everything that had happened up to that point. I see. This is a textbook case of financial abuse. And as for this so-called verbal agreement mentioned in the complaint, proving its existence legally would be extremely difficult for the plaintiffs. Then we can win, right? When I leaned forward, he slowly shook his head with caution. Just because there is no evidence does not automatically mean we will win. In family related cases, especially civil claims for damages, the judge's personal impressions carry significant weight. If we end up before a judge who places strong moral value on family helping one another, things could become complicated. That can't be. However, we do have a way to fight. First, we must demonstrate that no such contract ever existed, and at the same time build an objective case showing just how unreasonable and unjust their demands are. Andrew Collins's calm and methodical analysis eased my heart, if only slightly. I formally retained him and began preparing for the battle in court. But reality unfolded exactly as Andrew had feared. Several weeks later, the day of the first hearing arrived. In the plaintiff's seat sat my parents and Melissa. The moment they saw me, they openly cast looks of contempt in my direction. My mother dabbed at her eyes theatrically with a handkerchief. My father glared at me with open hostility. And Melissa, dressed in a black dress, was playing the role of a tragic heroine. How shameless. My stomach twisted painfully with anger. Court is now in session. As the clerk's voice rang out, the judge entered from the door at the back of the courtroom. The instant I saw him, I heard Andrew, seated beside me, click his tongue quietly. This is bad. What's wrong? It's Judge Nathan. He's extremely conservative and famous for valuing family bonds above all else. For the plaintiffs, he's the best possible judge. For us, he's the worst. Judge Nathan took his seat on the bench, glanced down at the documents before him, and peered at us over his glasses. Plaintiffs Daniel Parker et al. Defendant Sophie Parker. Parent and child, is it? Truly regrettable. From the very beginning, he made no attempt to hide his bias. Counsel for the plaintiffs, your opening statement. The lawyer hired by my parents stood up and began speaking with exaggerated gestures. Your Honor, my clients, the Parker couple, have loved and nurtured their daughter, the defendant Sophie, with devotion and care. The fact that the defendant was able to succeed as an architect is due entirely to the selfless support of her parents. Every word of it was a lie. The defendant promised to repay that debt of gratitude by supporting her sister Melissa's home purchase. This was a sacred promise between family members. And yet, at the very last moment, the defendant broke it, driving her elderly parents and her emotionally fragile sister to the brink of despair. In the plaintiff's seats, my mother and Melissa began to cry out loud. Judge Nathan watched them with sympathetic eyes and then turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were cold, as if he were looking at a criminal. Defendant Sophie Parker, how do you respond to the statement you just heard? Andrew Collins stood up and calmly rebutted the claim. Your Honor, every assertion made by the plaintiffs is completely unfounded. The defendant has never made such a promise. And furthermore, the so-called support the plaintiffs are demanding is so excessive that it would ruin the defendant's own life. Excessive? Judge Nathan scoffed. According to the documents, the defendant's annual income far exceeds the average for her age group. She is single and has no dependents. On the other hand, her sister Melissa has been unable to secure steady employment and is struggling financially. The judge leaned forward from the bench and addressed me directly. Sophie, before legal arguments, I want to ask you this as a human being. Do you have no sense of compassion? Excuse me? Blood is thicker than water, as the saying goes. When someone with financial means helps a struggling family member, that is a moral obligation that comes even before any legal duty. And yet you refuse to pay simply because there is no written contract. Do you not feel ashamed? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I could not believe my ears. The judge was lecturing me unilaterally based not on law but on morality. But, Your Honor, I found myself shouting despite everything. I earn my living through my own hard work. My sister is struggling because she refuses to work. Why must my effort be exploited to pay for her laziness? Order. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. Defendant, you were not granted permission to speak. Is it not precisely this selfish attitude that caused this lawsuit in the first place? Judge Nathan's face was flushed red. By the next session, I strongly recommend that you consider a settlement. Discuss this within your family and resolve it amicably. Otherwise, the judgment may be a harsh one. It was, in effect, a threat. Court is adjourned. We were practically driven out of the courtroom. Once in the hallway, my parents and Melissa, who had been waiting, approached us. You heard him, Sophie? My mother smiled smugly. The judge said it himself, didn't he? Stop being stubborn and just pay up already. If you do that, we'll withdraw the lawsuit. I can't wait to live in my vacation home. Melissa piled on in an innocent-sounding voice. Don't be ridiculous. I shot back in a trembling voice, but there was no strength behind it. Having been denied even by a judge, a representative of public authority, I felt completely isolated and alone. Let's go, Sophie. Andrew took hold of my arm and pulled me away from them. When we stepped outside the courthouse, a cold wind whipped against us. Mr. Collins, am I going to lose? Do I really have to hand over all my savings like the judge says and spend the rest of my life as my sister's slave? Tears spilled out uncontrollably. He said nothing and quietly handed me a handkerchief. Then, with the sharpest look I had ever seen on his face, he turned back toward the courthouse building. No, you won't lose. In fact, the judge's attitude today lit a fire under me. He pulled a notebook from his inner pocket. Sophie, could you show me the property materials for that vacation home one more time? There was something that felt off in the documents the plaintiff submitted in court. Something off? Yes, for a property priced at $800,000, the status of the mortgage liens was unnatural. And Melissa's attitude? That wasn't just the face of a spoiled child. I sensed impatience, like she was hiding something. He grinned. Let's dig into this thoroughly. The pitch-black truth hidden behind this thing they call family love. At those words, a tiny flame of hope that had almost gone out deep inside me flickered back to life. That's right. This was no time to cry. If they were going to attack me with morality, then I would fight back with the weapon of facts. From that day on, we began a thorough investigation of their assets. That was how we prepared for our counterattack. And then came the day of the second hearing. My parents were as confident as ever, smirking at me. Melissa even had a new designer handbag resting on her lap as she fiddled with her smartphone. Sophie, there's still time. Before the session began, my father called out to me. If you apologize right now and promise to pay, I'll withdraw the lawsuit. Consider it family mercy. Mercy? I smiled back at him coldly. I'll return those words to you exactly as they are, Dad. You'd better run while you still can. What did you say? Just as my father's face turned red, the clerk's voice rang out. Court is now in session. All rise. Judge Nathan entered the courtroom and took his seat with heavy deliberation. The moment he opened his mouth, he shot me an irritated look. Now then, defendant. At the previous session, I believe I strongly recommended a settlement. Have you finished discussing this with your family? No, Your Honor, I answered while staring straight at the judge. There is no room for settlement, because it has become clear that there is serious concealment of facts underlying this lawsuit. Concealment, you say? The judge frowned. Beside me, Andrew stood up and raised the thick stack of evidence documents he was holding high in the air. Your Honor, please turn to page 3 of these materials. Andrew's voice carried clearly through the silent courtroom. Judge Nathan adjusted his glasses with a suspicious expression and lowered his gaze to the documents before him. What lay there was the latest certified copy of the property registry for the vacation home, Lakeside Manor, obtained through our exhaustive investigation. This is... The crease between the judge's brows deepened. It appears to differ from the materials submitted by the plaintiffs. Yes, what the plaintiffs submitted were documents from immediately after the purchase. However, what my client has submitted is the most recent version, issued just 3 days ago. Andrew continued slowly. In addition to the first priority home mortgage, this property had a second priority mortgage lien placed on it just 1 month after the purchase. My father, seated in the plaintiff's section, leaned forward. What are you talking about? We borrowed no money other than the home loan. We only have one contract with the bank. Yes, that's what you both believe. This was the first time I opened my mouth, fixing my gaze on my parents and on my sister who was sitting there, pale and trembling. But it seems Melissa felt differently. What do you mean by that, Sophie? My father shouted, but the judge struck the gavel and silenced him. Order. Counsel for the defense, continue. Andrew nodded and revealed the decisive fact. The creditor for this second mortgage lien is Shadow Lake Finance, a non-bank consumer finance company. and in the debtor field, there is only a single name listed. He paused for a breath and then read the name aloud. Melissa Parker. What? I heard my mother, Rebecca Parker, gasp. And the maximum amount of that lien is $350,000. A shock rippled through the courtroom. Judge Nathan exclaimed in disbelief. In addition to the home mortgage, another $350,000 was borrowed, using this vacation home as collateral? Impossible, my father shouted. That can't be done. Our consent as co-owners would have been required. Normally, yes, Andrew replied calmly. But what if Melissa forged a power of attorney? Or what if she lied and told you these were renovation documents and tricked you into signing them? The color drained rapidly from my parents' faces. The two of them slowly turned to look at Melissa sitting beside them. Melissa hung her head, clutching her expensive designer handbag, her entire body trembling violently. That sight alone was confession enough. Melissa? My mother's voice shook. It can't be true, can it? $350,000. What did you even use that money for? That's... Melissa tried to say something in a tiny voice, but I cut her off. This isn't over yet, Your Honor. I stood up and delivered an even more brutal truth. We also traced where that $350,000 actually went. Andrew presented the next piece of evidence: bank transaction statements. These are records from Melissa's personal bank account. Over the past several months, thousands of dollars were being transferred almost daily, and on some days, tens of thousands at a time. The destinations are Golden Spin, Vegas Dream, all of them overseas online casino sites. Judge Nathan stood there, utterly stunned. That's not all. In an attempt to recover her losses, she piled on even more debt from multiple consumer finance companies and even illegal loan sharks. Based on what we were able to confirm, the total exceeds $200,000. This was the true face of my sister, the so-called delicate artist. $550,000. My father collapsed back into his chair. It's a lie. Tell me it's a lie, Melissa. No, Dad. Melissa finally lifted her head and screamed through tears. It's an investment. This is an investment. If I win at the casino, I can pay it all back double right away. I'm so close, just a little more luck and everything will be wiped clean. Those words became the decisive blow that revealed to everyone in the courtroom that she was a severe gambling addict. Silence. The judge's furious voice echoed through the courtroom. So this is what it comes down to. The plaintiffs either did not know or deliberately concealed the facts of their daughter's gambling debts and the unauthorized mortgage liens, and then demanded that the defendant, the older sister, take responsibility for the home loan payments? Seizing the moment, I turned the judge's earlier words about moral obligation back on him. Your Honor, at the previous session, you told me that helping one's family is a moral obligation, didn't you? The judge averted his eyes awkwardly. But please look at the reality before us. This vacation home is already tied to more than $550,000 in hidden debt. If I had done exactly as my parents demanded and signed the mortgage contract as a joint guarantor, what do you think would have happened? I pointed toward the judge and then toward my parents. It is only a matter of time before Melissa goes bankrupt. When that happens, the creditors will seize the vacation home and put it up for auction. The property will pass into someone else's hands, while only the debt remains. And as a joint guarantor, I would be left with the obligation to repay the entire mortgage in a lump sum, and potentially even be held responsible for my sister's debts as well. I stepped forward. Your Honor, let me ask you plainly. To destroy my life in order to fill the bottomless pit of debt created by a gambling-addicted sister. Is that what the law defines as a family duty? Where exactly is the selfishness in my actions, and where is the filial impiety you accused me of? In response to my words, the courtroom fell completely silent. No one could offer a rebuttal. Judge Nathan's face was flushed deep red. It was not from anger, but from shame. He realized that he had almost been made an accomplice to an outrageous fraud. Counsel for the plaintiffs. The judge's voice was low and terrifying, scraping along the ground. The lawyer hired by my parents stood up, sweating profusely. Yes. Were you aware of these facts? I had no idea. This is the first I've heard of it. If I had known, I would never have accepted a case like this. The lawyer immediately turned on my parents and Melissa. I am the one who was deceived, Your Honor. The plaintiffs concealed critical facts. Don't you dare. This time, my father lunged toward the lawyer. You said we would win. You said that if we paid money, we could save our daughter. Stop it, Dad, Melissa screamed in tears. This isn't my fault, it's Sophie's fault. If she had just paid the money from the beginning, I could have gambled more at the casino and won everything back. Are you still saying things like that? My mother slapped Melissa hard across the face. A sharp, dry sound echoed through the courtroom. Because of you. Because of you. We're ruined. The courtroom descended into complete chaos. Order, order. When the uproar finally subsided, Judge Nathan let out a deep sigh and turned toward me. There was no longer any hostility in his eyes, only deep remorse. Miss Sophie Parker, the judge spoke quietly. I hereby retract my previous remarks and offer my sincere apology. You were right. This is not family helping one another. It is blatant exploitation and a fraudulent act. The judge turned toward the plaintiff's seats and delivered his ruling in a voice like ice. This lawsuit is hereby dismissed. The plaintiff's claims lack any legal basis and are deemed to constitute an abuse of the judicial system. Furthermore, the plaintiffs are ordered to bear the full amount of the defendant's litigation costs and attorney's fees. Then he added one final statement. Miss Melissa Parker and her parents, the place you should be facing is not this courtroom. It is bankruptcy court and a place of repentance for your own past actions. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel rang out and my complete victory was sealed. The lawsuit was dismissed immediately. The ruling was swift and merciless. The claims brought by my parents and my sister, the plaintiffs, were rejected in their entirety, and instead they were ordered to bear the full cost of the litigation. And that accursed property, Lakeside Manor, was immediately seized by the creditor financial institutions, as the $350,000 in hidden debt we uncovered collided with the original home mortgage. But the fallout did not end there. Because of the gambling debts exceeding $200,000 that were exposed in court, my sister Melissa, now completely unable to keep her head above water, was forced into personal bankruptcy. My parents, who had acted as joint guarantors, were dragged down with her, losing all of their savings and ultimately being forced to give up the family home they had lived in for years. Several weeks later, one day, my smartphone was filled with an unbelievable number of missed calls. Dad, Mom, Mom, Dad. My voicemail inbox had reached its limit, and when I pressed play, a storm of abuse came pouring out. Sophie, what do you think you're doing? Have you forgotten everything we did to raise you? You heartless monster. Money-grubbing witch. Abandoning your family will send you straight to hell. You betrayed your family. Their voices of accusation echoed emptily, but they no longer reached my heart. I blocked every number and cut off all contact. That was my way of drawing a final line, my last reckoning with what they called family. 6 months passed. Now I am standing on the balcony of a newly built condominium overlooking downtown Chicago. This place is not for anyone else. It is a true castle of my own, purchased entirely with my own savings. Here, there is no exploitation, no unreasonable demands, and no lies. There is only silence and peace. Breaking free from the curse of family required searing pain and immense courage, but beyond that pain awaited a life that no one could ever take away. My own.